Be lifted high, be lifted high.
Hi, Shallow family. Midweek refuel time. As you can see, I am back in my office and appreciate all the prayers and checking up on me from friends and family and church members, all that. It's just been awesome, and appreciate your guys' love and support. But I'm doing good. Last couple of days have been the best, um, as far as recovery goes, not in any pain, and yeah, on the mend, on the way up. So I'm back at work. So I'm glad to be back with you for our midweek refuel. We're going to be covering John chapter 18 tonight. And we've been doing sort of a mixture within the book of John and in all the Gospels where there's teaching that happens. You know, the last chapter was all about Jesus' prayer and him doing teaching within those prayers. But today it's going to be a story. It's going to be an account of the betrayal of Jesus, and that is in John chapter 18. So just keep that in mind as we look it over because it's kind of more of a story. And I wasn't sure where I was going to um, end it because it's sort of one continuous story. But let's just see how it goes, and we can stop wherever we need to. Okay, verse 1. This is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. After Jesus finished this prayer, he left with his disciples and went across to the Kidron Valley. Now, this is one of those examples where sometimes we read something and it just sort of glosses over, but there's a significance to that. And the significance is in this note that I'll read you, the Kidron Ravine is the path David took when he was forced to flee Jerusalem because of the betrayal of his son Absalom. David went up the Mount of Olives weeping. Jesus went up also in sorrow. David went to save himself, but Jesus went to save the people of the world. So isn't it interesting that there is a parallel here? There is got a fly buzzing around here. There is a. It's always interesting to me that this is the place that David fled from Absalom because of betrayal. And here Jesus is about to be betrayed by Judas, and he's in the same location. So I think supernaturally, sometimes there are things that happen in certain locations that are connected. And I think that's pretty interesting and incredible. And let's keep reading. To a place where there was a garden. Judas, the traitor, knew where this place was, for Jesus had gone there often with his disciples. The Pharisees and the leading priests had given Judas a large detachment or money of Rome. I'm sorry, that's not true. Large detachment. He had been sent with a group of soldiers um, to go and apprehend Jesus. So a large group of Roman soldiers, a temple and temple police. Can you imagine having the temple police? It'd be like Shiloh Family Church having a police squad that would go out and arrest you for, you know, violating something. That's just weird. Anyway, temple police to seize Jesus. Judas guided them to the garden, all of them carrying torches and lanterns and armed with swords and spears, which is so interesting because what was Jesus going to do? Fight them? Verse 4. Jesus, knowing full well that what was about to happen, went out to the garden entrance to meet them. Stepping forward, he asked, "Who are you looking for?" "Jesus of Nazareth." "Nazareth," they replied. Now Judas, the traitor, was among them. And he replied, "I am he." And the moment Jesus spoke the words, "I am he," the mob fell backward to the ground. Isn't that amazing? The power of God operating even in a show of force. It was like the angels, um, you know, backing Jesus up in this moment. So that's pretty cool. Verse 7. So once more, Jesus asked them, "Who are you looking for?" And they stood up and they answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." I don't know that I would have wanted to say that again after being knocked back. I think that would have woken me up to supernatural realities, but apparently it didn't. In verse 8, Jesus replied, I told you that I'm the one you're looking for. So if you want me, let these men go home. Speaking of his disciples, he said this to fulfill the prophecy he had spoken. Father, not one of those you have given me has been lost. Suddenly, Peter took out his sword and struck the high priest's servant, slashing off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus ordered, Peter, put your sword away. Do you really think I'm avoiding the suffering which my Father has assigned to me? Um, so in this particular account, they don't talk about Jesus healing Malchus's ear, but they do highlight here Jesus saying to Peter, listen, this is part of the plan. This is part of what I've been sent to the earth for, is to reveal what the Father has assigned me to do. And, no amount of show of force is going to change that. And nor do we want it to change, because Jesus was establishing the new covenant in his blood. And if I can sort of take this off the beaten path for a minute, um, total normal reaction for Peter to stand up for his friend. And I think that we're living in times currently where we want to stand up for our freedom, we want to stand up for our rights, all of those things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm not saying we shouldn't, you know, um, be proactive in our approach to life these days. But I will say this, the bigger picture is that God is in charge and he's got a plan. And I have to put my faith in that plan and not necessarily in my feelings. Because sometimes my feelings are not telling me the truth, or they're trying to, the enemy will manipulate them to get me to do something that I shouldn't do. And anything that doesn't come from faith is sin. So anything that doesn't come from my heavenly perspective that gives me through the Holy Spirit, that's the wrong version. So I need to hear from God and not just react to what's going on around me, but to know that God's got a bigger purpose. And I think that's the message that Jesus is giving to Peter here in this very challenging moment. Okay, so Jesus is now taken before Annas, who is a temple official, and he is being questioned. So let's read about that. Verse 12. Then the soldiers and their captain, along with the Jewish officers, seized Jesus and tied him up. They took him first to Annas, as he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. So Annas is the father-in-law of Caiaphas. Caiaphas, was the one who had persuaded the Jewish leaders that it would be better off to have one person die for the sake of the people. So there, John is just giving us context. And, here Jesus is being brought before Annas to be questioned. So now we're going to talk about Peter's role in all of this. Verse 15. Peter and another disciple followed along behind them as they took Jesus into the courtyard of Annas's palace. Since the other disciple was well known to the high priest, he entered in. So there John is talking about himself. But Peter was left standing outside by the gate. Then the other disciple came back out to the servant girl who was guarding the gate, and convinced her to allow Peter inside. As he passed inside, the young servant girl guarding the gate took a look at Peter and said to him, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" But he denied it, saying, "No, I am not." Now, because it was cold, the soldiers and guards made a charcoal fire and were standing around it to keep warm. So Peter huddled there with them around the fire. So Peter's there, obviously, with great interest as to what is going to happen to Jesus. He gets to get a little bit closer to the action, even though he's not in the room, and it's challenging. It's a difficult situation. Peter is doing what I think all of us would do, which is self-preservation, and but yet he really cares about what would happen to Jesus. So he's kind of torn between his natural self and his supernatural self. And so we'll pick it up from there. Here's Jesus being interrogated by Annas. This is verse 19. The high priest interrogated Jesus concerning his disciples and his teachings. Jesus answered Annas' questions by saying, I have said nothing in secret. At all times I have taught openly and publicly in a synagogue, in the temple courts, and wherever the people assemble. Why would you ask me for evidence to condemn me? Ask those who have heard what I've taught, they can tell you. Just then, one of the guards standing near Jesus punched him in the face with his fist and said, How dare you answer the high priest like that? Jesus replied, If my words are evil, then prove it. But if I haven't broken any laws, then why would you hit me? Then Anna sent Jesus, still tied up, across the way to the high priest Caiaphas. So, interesting situation. Jesus is saying, I haven't hid anything. I've been teaching publicly. You've heard all these things. You know, what is the big deal in this moment? Although I think he knew what the big deal in this moment was. I think he was just putting it back on them to see how they would respond. And the response was to hit Jesus in the face, which doesn't sound very good. Probably, I would hate to be that person. Hopefully, he repented of it and came to know Jesus later. That's a bummer. But interesting that their fear, a lot of times what happens is when we're afraid, we try to control. And in this situation, their fear caused them to respond like that. And, Jesus was basically saying, if I'm evil, prove it. But there's no reason to resort to violence. So lots going on here. Okay, so Peter's second and third denials. Now we switch scenes and we go back to Peter, who's in the courtyard. Meanwhile, Peter was standing in the courtyard by the fire. And one of the guards standing there said to him, Aren't you one of his disciples? I know you are. Peter swore and said, I am not his disciple. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, looked at him and said, Wait, didn't I see you out there in the garden with Jesus? Then Peter denied it a third time and said, No. At that very same moment, a rooster crowed nearby. So we all know that story is a very familiar story. And again, I would just point out that Peter was in self-preservation mode. So he was just looking at it from, I don't want to be the next one that's going to be crucified. Although ultimately Peter suffered the same fate, only he chose to be crucified upside down because he didn't want to die like his Lord. So Peter ended up being pretty courageous after Jesus restored him. So verse 28, before dawn, they took Jesus from his trial before Caiaphas to the Roman governor's palace. Now, the Jews refused to go into the Roman governor's residence to avoid ceremonial defilement before eating the Passover meal. So Pilate came outside where they waited and asked him pointedly, Tell me, what exactly is the accusation that you bring against this man? What has he done? They answered, We wouldn't be coming here to hand over this criminal if he wasn't guilty of some wrongdoing. Pilate said, Very well, then, you take him yourselves and go pass judgment on him according to your Jewish laws. But the Jewish leaders complained and said, We don't have legal authority to put anyone to death. So now it's gone all the way to the end result here. You should have him crucified. This was to fulfill the words of Jesus when he predicted the manner of death that he would die. So they're angry enough that they want to get rid of him because he is uncovering, he is challenging their authority, teaching with authority, teaching with the authority of the relationship that he had with the Father. Jesus was righteousness, and he was uncovering their version of righteousness, their self-righteousness, because they used laws to control people, and they did not like that Jesus was calling them on the carpet for that. Okay, verse 33, we're getting through this. Upon hearing this, Pilate went back inside his palace and summoned Jesus. Looking him over, Pilate asked him, Are you really the king of the Jews? And Jesus replied, Are you asking because you really want to know, or are you asking this because others have said it about me? Pilate responded, Only a Jew would care about this. Do I look like a Jew? It's your own people and your own religious leaders that have handed you over to me. So tell me, Jesus, what have you done wrong? Jesus looked at Pilate and said, "The royal power of my kingdom realm doesn't come from this world. If it did, then my followers would be fighting to the end to defend me from the Jewish leaders. My kingdom realm authority is not from this realm." Then Pilate responded, "Oh, so then you are a king." "You are right," Jesus said. "I was born a king, and I have come into this world to prove what truth really is, and everyone who loves truth will receive my words." So, then Pilate said his famous line, "What is truth?" Okay, so Jesus is comparing for him, I have authority as a king from another realm, and that realm is the kingdom realm. Would it make any sense to Pilate? Because you know, Pilate is a ruler of a natural realm, Rome. And, so he's trying to figure out what is it that Jesus is claiming he is. And here Jesus reveals it to him. I'm a king, but I come from a different realm. And then he says, if you believe me, if you can see who I am, then we can prove to you what the truth is, because those who believe truth receive what I have. And that's when Pilate issues his famous quote. Okay, we're almost there. As silence filled the room, Pilate went back out to where the Jewish leaders were waiting and said to them, "He's not guilty. I couldn't find one fault with him. Now, you do know that we have a custom that I release one prisoner every year at Passover. Shall I release your king, the king of the Jews?" They shouted over and over, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a robber and a troublemaker. So, um, you know, again, very familiar story, but here the Jews asked for a criminal over the Savior of the world because they couldn't see it. They were so locked in their religious mindset. They were so locked in their belief system that they couldn't see that Jesus, the Messiah, the long awaited one, was right there. And I think there's a great lesson for us here that we can get so dogmatic, we can get so locked into what we believe is truth that a lot of times it causes us to miss what God's really up to. And I would just remind us of I talked about this yesterday. If you're a church, um, there was a time when I believe it was right before the Jews went into Jericho that there was an angel of the Lord that stood before Joshua. And Joshua said, "Are you for us or our enemies?" And the angel's response was no. And ultimately he said, "I'm on the side of God. I'm on the side of the kingdom." And that's in the site, and the ground that you're walking on is holy ground. So take off your shoes. And I think that's such an important lesson for all of us. I think we live in a world that's trying to get us to take sides. And there may be one side you lean more towards than the other, whatever that may be, why ever that may be. But we have to remember that we are first and foremost citizens of the kingdom. And so that will help us, because sometimes the person on the side that we agree with is agreeing with things that aren't good. And so I need to be able to have discernment to recognize that. And sometimes the person on the other side that I don't agree with has some kingdom values. And I need to be able to agree it, even if they're not on the team that I normally agree with. I'm not saying that happens a lot, probably doesn't happen very often at all. But if I only look at it in terms of what side I'm on, I won't be able to see things clearly. So, first and foremost, I'm a kingdom person. Jesus understood this. He was there to bring about the purposes of the kingdom, the purpose of his Father. And so he was able to do this very difficult thing. We're going to see more of that in the next chapter. But he could do it because he was committed to following what the kingdom said. So there you have it. And we have the kingdom because the Holy Spirit lives in us, and the kingdom of heaven is within us. So be encouraged. You have resource that God has given you. Have a great week, and we'll be back next week for John chapter 19.
Be lifted high, be lifted high. For